I'm sorry about that, everybody. Had a little glitch there. Hey, I'm Jayme CheeseSlice. Sorry about the music there. It just accidentally cut off. I'll have to fix that. Hey, so anyway, this is I'm Jayme CheeseSlice. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. Um, we are going to be talking to Wyatt Reed today, but before we do that, I want to make sure you like and subscribe. Um, the YouTube's changing the algorithm, and it's more important now than ever for you to be engaged with the shows you watch. If you want to keep them going up there, they're changing the algorithm. They're changing the way they're going to verify your age with AI. That's got a lot of people scared, especially people who make content for under 18. But even if you're over 18, they might think that you're not 18 or older and screw up your algorithm and not show you things that you might want to see. So censorship is here. It's coming. A lot of things are different, but one thing that you can do to help our show and help yourself make sure you get the right recommendations is like and subscribe. And even if you're watching this later, leave a comment. That will probably help as well. So anyhow, without further ado, let's go out and bring on our hosts, Gloria and Jayme. How are you guys doing? And
Very
our
good,
guest
thanks.
today is Wyatt Reed from the Grayzone. How are you doing, Wyatt? And we're going to be talking about FBI surveillance and also Wyatt's experience as an intrepid journalist traveling around the world and doing his work. All right. So we're going to record about an hour. I'm going to hand it off to Gloria. She's going to start the show. Let's do this.
Hey everyone, welcome to Uncontrolled Opposition, where together we battle mind wars with truth strikes. I'm Gloria Guillo, and I'm here with my co-host, Professor Jayme Kuzmarov. We are very pleased to welcome our guest, intrepid investigative journalist and Grayzone editor, Wyatt Reed, to discuss the FBI's presence and surveillance at a left forum held in John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City. The opinions you hear are ours and our guests, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. Our content is intended for informational and educational purposes only, not professional, medical, or legal advice. Listeners are encouraged to form their own opinions. While our subject is the FBI's physical presence and surveillance at a forum held in a New York City college, this intrusion is tied to documents recently released by Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence. The documents show that under the fake banner of foreign interference, a multi-agency domestic influence operation was launched, not to protect an election, but to preemptively delegitimize its outcome. As a bonus, Russiagate created a McCarthy-esque pretext that justified greater domestic surveillance and became a handy backdrop for its planned proxy war with Russia using Ukraine. Essentially, investigations were initiated and conclusions reported without verified intelligence. This misuse of power not only ruined any trust still remaining in the American people regarding the integrity of its intelligence agencies, but it also destroyed the lives, careers, and rights of folks caught in the crosshairs and even sitting in the sidelines. Take, for example, comedian, human and civil rights activist, and WBAI radio personality Randy Credico. He was the alleged subject of the FBI's appearance at the college's forum. For Randy's public support of Julian Assange, one of the greatest journalists and publishers of our time, and for also tangentially knowing Roger Stone, a political operative connected to the Trump campaign, Randy was unjustly investigated and dragged into congressional and FBI probes and hearings in 2018. This was supposedly over WikiLeaks documents that were allegedly obtained through Russian interference. All the time, the FBI and CIA knew the documents were from a source inside the DNC by its transmission signature. But none of this represents a failure of democratic oversight. From its inception in 1949, the U.S. intelligence has served as a mechanism of control, externally through regime change and internally through surveillance and suppression. In the Cold War era, the threat was communism. This label provided justification for domestic infiltration of labor unions, civil rights, and anti-war groups, the blackmail of political figures, and the construction of an entertainment and news industry blacklist to silence dissent. After 9/11, terrorism became the new pretext. The surveillance state expanded beyond any constitutional boundary. The Patriot Act normalized mass data collection, intelligence fusion centers were embedded across the country, and every American became a potential suspect. By 2021, parents protesting school policy were labeled security risks. Whistleblowers and independent researchers were categorized as disinformation threats. Social platforms were coerced into enforcing speech restrictions drafted by government funded NGOs. Public private coordination replaced formal censorship, sidestepping legal limits through third party enforcement. The category of extremism now encompasses any deviation from centralized consensus. The system is not partisan, it is hierarchical. It targets disruption, not ideology. Anti war activism, medical dissent, economic populism, unauthorized journalism are all processed through the same threat response framework. Meanwhile, the public funds its own suppression. The largely discredited Mueller investigation cost over $32 million, according to PolitiFact. Post 2020 domestic surveillance budgets exceed $100 billion annually. But the real price of this weaponized security apparatus is that the mere existence creates a chilling effect, which results in self censorship and the normalization of distrust as the default mode in civic engagement. Anyone who questions any ludicrous prevailing narrative is relegated to being a conspiracy theorist. Sadly, the disclosures from DNI Gabbard do not reveal deviation. They expose that the system is functioning as intended. The intelligence state disciplines us through, through perception management by accentuating threats, be they foreign, domestic, real, or imagined. This is not institutional failure. It is institutional success by design. The question is, how long will the public continue to accept being classified as the enemy? Thank you. Wyatt, please tell us about your article and what happened at this forum. Also, I believe Jeremy said that he was attending that forum as well.
Well, in that case, I think Jeremy could probably give an even better summary than I could. I personally didn't attend it, but I did pick up on these disclosures that were recently made by journalist Chip Gibbons, who filed a Freedom of Information request and uncovered this two-page FBI document. It's specifically an FD 302 report, which is the kind of report that the FBI uses to document interviews with the subjects of their investigation. The subject of their investigation and the reason that two FBI special agents ended up surveilling a left forum panel at the John Jay College in New York City in 2018 was there ostensibly and apparently, and the most logical explanation is that they were trailing Randy Credico, the comedian, radio host, activist, who I think all of us have quite a bit of respect for. He was, of course, alleged to have served as a, quote, back channel for Roger Stone, and was accused of having basically funneled, documents that supposedly were hacked by the Russians to the Trump campaign for some kind of electoral interference purposes. Now, that narrative was very much undermined, as you noted, Gloria, by the recent disclosures by DNI Gabbard. But nonetheless, it seemed to have its intended effect, which was to justify kind of the creation of this larger anti-establishment dragnet that could be weaponized against whoever the enemy of the day turn out to be. And the irony here is that our editor-in-chief, Max Blumenthal, while speaking on this panel, had a great quote, and he said, "Russiagate, one of the principal reasons that I opposed it and why I called it out from the beginning is that while it seems to be directed at Trump, it's going to go beyond Trump and it will be used to suppress the left, as classic McCarthyism always did." And this was obviously a fairly prescient point. It was so prescient that he was making it unknowingly to two FBI agents. So, as he made that statement, it was literally being surveilled by the FBI, which I think proves the point. So that the reason we suspect that this 2-page report is largely redacted, so we don't know exactly who the target of this was. But my strong suspicion is that it was Randy Credico, because after this event, which the FBI agents surveilled, they continued to follow him while he did a stand-up comedy routine, and then they approached him afterwards. According to Randy, they walked up to him and said, "Oh, we love your set," and then introduced themselves as FBI agents. And he said he very quickly got on the phone with his lawyer and handed the phone to them, and they made arrangements to speak later, but that he, didn't interact with these agents again after that. So that would certainly lend some credence to the idea that they were targeting Credico, and basically just using this as a justification to target whoever amongst his friends and colleagues who they had any kind of suspicion, or really no suspicion at all, just to go on kind of a fishing expedition is really the sense that you get from this report. And of course, it is, as I noted, heavily redacted. So really, some of the only information that we can glean from it is that they had a highly descriptive sort of explanation of what happened in the panel, the physical sort of layout of it. But beyond that, the rest of the document is basically redacted. Other things that we can kind of glean from this is that one of the special agents is named. His name is Andrew Thomas Mitchell. And he apparently is a bit of a big deal in the counterintelligence division. He was listed in a Department of Justice press release in 2024 as having received an Attorney General's Award for having served as the FBI unit chief on an investigation into a West Virginia husband and wife who were convicted of attempting to sell nuclear submarine secrets to a foreign government. So he apparently part of the counterintelligence division that would track with the counterintelligence label that was used to target Roger Stone and presumably Randy Credico as well.
I had spoken to Randy, and well, actually, I didn't speak to him. I wrote him an email, and he kept sending me stuff because he didn't even want to talk about this topic. He's so over it. But he was saying that he knew Roger Stone because they had both worked together, not so much together, but on the same side for marijuana reform, and that was kind of how they knew each other. But they were kind of frenemies, so to speak. They weren't really close. They were on two different sides politically. Roger Stone was a supporter of Trump and a political insider with the Republican Party, and Randy has always been a liberal and a left person. So I just wanted to establish how that happened. And he's still kind of bruised over it, Randy, because it did affect. And he was really in the sidelines. I mean, his knowledge was his knowledge of Julian Assange, and that was kind of weaponized against him. And he was really not a main player here. He was in the sidelines, and it affected his career. It affected his income. He had legal bills. So even to Americans who are not actually in the crosshairs, who are just on the sidelines, are really affected by these witch hunts. Jayme wrote an article on this. I'm hoping he can tell us a little bit about the implications of this too.
Well, I think, Gloria, you're absolutely right. Both of you guys, I think Wyatt and Gloria, on your points that this is much larger. I mean, it affects individuals' lives, but it has huge ramifications vis-a-vis policy. As far as targeting the left, because I think there was an attempt to marginalize and demonize Julian Assange, and people like Credico are associated with left-wing movements in the United States, which, as we know, are very weak. Associate them with the Russian. And it was a classic, technique of McCarthyism. And they tried to claim that, Russia was behind WikiLeaks and that it were the Russians that leaked these documents to WikiLeaks that shaped the election. But I mean, right away, the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, which was a group founded by Ray McGovern and former intelligence professionals, they did their own study and they found that it was an internal leak. These emails were not a hack. These were the Hillary Clinton emails, that showed how the DNC had rigged the primary for Hillary Clinton, and it made her look bad. And they accused the Russians of hacking these documents to tip the election to Trump. But the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, right away, their study of the forensics found it came from a leak. And then Craig Murray spoke to a member of the DNC who said it came from somebody within the DNC. But then they were trying to create this narrative of the Russians. And it's convenient, to involve people like Credico because, as you say, he's associated with the left. So, this side project is to discredit the left and any dissent. And then the left caved in. I mean, even at that left forum, I think the other thing they do is they plant infiltrators at groups like Left Forum. They brought a guy, I remember that year, they had that panel, and I had published a book. Of course, few people pay attention to historians. I published a historical analysis comparing the climate of the first Cold War and the second Cold War, and how they were just kind of repeating in a different guise what had gone on before. And I didn't get a lot of attention or sales for that book. But and then you had Ray McGovern and Blumenthal on the panel. But then they had a panel, this guy Michael Isikoff, who is an agent of the deep state and a Mockingbird type journalist. And he was, he's really had no place at the Left Forum. He's not a leftist. He's a CIA, linked journalist who is promoting disinformation about Russiagate and Russia's role, whether in election hacking or just presenting Russia in very dark light at every turn to try and mobilize support for the new Cold War and for the U.S. arms sales to Ukraine, billions of dollars of arms sales. And as we know, a lot of liberals supported the arms sales to Ukraine. They've been gung-ho about supporting supposedly democratic Ukraine and standing up to autocratic Russia. Meanwhile, the democratic Ukraine banned 12 parties and assassinates its political opponents. And it's been, money into a sinkhole like Afghanistan. But many on the left still support it. And that was the goal. That's why they brought Isikoff to the Left Forum, to draw left-oriented people and progressives to support the new Cold War. So that's their other technique. And Gloria, you're an expert on that. But Isikoff is a tainted journalist. He's a symbol of everything that's wrong with the mainstream media, and the reason why more and more people are reading Grayzone, reading Covert Action, because the mainstream media just has people like Isikoff who repeat government CIA disinformation, promote Russophobia, and promote wars of aggression that are horrible for everybody. And this war has cost over 1 million lives. This is a deadly, we might think some of this is kind of funny and silly, but look at the larger stakes. 1 million lives have been lost, at least, in this war in Ukraine that was triggered by the United States and supported by a lot of American liberals because of the dirty tricks that they use.
Right, exactly, and the lethality, I think, of what Russiagate would become certainly was not clear to me at the time. Just how deadly something like that would be, how it would be used to kind of manufacture a consensus among Western liberals that this basically Russia is single-handedly responsible for the Trump presidency and everything that entails. Isikoff,
I hope you also talk about your experience in Ukraine after you finish what you're saying.
Okay, Isikoff is an interesting figure. unlike us, not we're appearing on Uncontrolled Opposition. He seems very much the opposite. He really kind of came to the forefront thanks to a lot of this Russiagate stuff, and then he, is able to use his position to actually get interesting information. He did publish useful information regarding the Pompeo-led CIA plot to potentially even assassinate Assange. So they play both sides. They kind of leverage this mainstream credibility to force you to go through them. And unless you're talking to an Isakov, your story won't get out there the way you want it to, right? And then conversely, they know pretty much where the line is, right? And you're not going to expose Pompeo while he's still in power, right? But later on down the road, once this thing's kind of all dead and buried and wrapped up, now it's okay. We can trickle out this information. So that's kind of my take on the role of these sort of gatekeeper journalists, as it were. Credico, I think, has every reason to be resentful and not necessarily want to dig up this chapter of the past, because I assume it was kind of personally painful for him to have to go through this multiple subpoenas, having to testify between the House and this Mueller commission to just say, no, I'm not a treasonous backchannel, infiltrator in American politics. I'm a comedian and a radio show host, and I make my opinions known, and that's about it. But yeah, this of course was the magic of Russiagate, was that all sorts of innocuous activities could be checked twice. You could find yourself on all types of lists, and up to including I think that kind of the normalization of putting journalists on these kind of blacklists and running after them, chasing them with the FBI. We can see some pretty clear parallels now with the Ukraine situation, for example, with how many lists that were funded by the United States government, various Ukraine blacklists of American journalists like myself, and top officials now of the Trump administration, including the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, including people like Joe Kent, I believe, who's now the counterterror director, who were listed on enemies of the state lists with United States government taxpayer funds that was sent to Ukraine via either USAID or the National Endowment for Democracy.
Are you on the kill list too? Oh, Jeremy is.
Yeah. They put me on that one when I
has
when
the
I went
address is
to.
Langley.
Yes, they at least want to present themselves as CIA affiliated. Certainly wouldn't surprise me if they are. They listed me on their on Mirot Vorets, I believe is the name of it, the so-called peacemaker list, where they put up photos and addresses of people, and after they're killed, they put up a new photo that says eliminated over their face. The Peacemaker website, of course. So that was just one of a handful of websites that listed myself and others. Many times it didn't really seem like there was much rhyme or reason for this. It was kind of any opponent that was encountered by the Ukrainian deep state would just find themselves, you liked too many posts the wrong times, you could end up on one of these lists. And then, it would go all the way up to people like Tucker Carlson, and you would see them, one after another with some random guy who this, list's curators had found on social media the next day. And then you'd have Mearsheimer and Tucker Carlson and, high-ranking U.S. politicians in the same breath.
I think they had Kissinger on at one point, right, Jeremy?
Yeah, I believe so. They had plenty of their former supporters would go on there, people like Arestovich, people who were in the government but then said mean things about Zelensky would find themselves on this website. And it is, for all intents and purposes, a official, non-official website. It is used at border crossings by Ukrainian guards. It's used to make sure that no undesirables are entering the country. They have this kind of plausibility arm's length denial where they say, "Oh, we're actually independent. We just, were founded by extremely influential members of the Ukrainian government, like Anton Gerashenko. We're actually independent, but we do, for all intents and purposes, function as an arm of the government." So that was a very strange, outcome of basically the RussiaGate phenomenon, the weaponization of that false narrative to generate real anti-Russia sentiment, and real distrust in other Americans, and kind of normalized this accusation that somebody's a traitor because they, have criticisms for Zelensky or for Netanyahu.
Or for anything for that matter, it seems. I mean, it's gone down to, Catholic parents at schools that object to curriculum. So it's really quite Wyatt. I was hoping you would talk a little bit about your experiences in Ukraine, that were really very chilling. I personally was very concerned for your safety. I've known Wyatt, I guess, since what was that? I don't remember, 2020.
Five years, I think 2019, or no, you may be right.
I don't remember
that
when
was 2020, I believe, or 2021.
Was it. It was before the COVID, or no, it was right during it.
It was
had
just
to be.
after it had started.
Yeah, right. We met in Nicaragua, and I was on one plane with a bunch of journalists, and Wyatt was on another plane, and our plane was coming in for a landing. These are very small military jets, and we were coming in for a landing right behind Wyatt's plane. And then as we're just about to touch down, and it was whiteout conditions, and these are military pilots, and as just we're about to touch down, all this red light starts bleeping, and this siren goes off, blah, 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 blah. And then next thing we know, the plane is just going straight up, at like just a vertical angle. And we all didn't know what was happening. We knew the CIA, was always keeping an eye on Nicaragua. We were, anything can happen. And this was during an election that the United States really, wasn't in favor of, wanted to influence, and there were lots of threats going on and things like that. So we all said goodbye to each other on the plane. We were like, well, if we die, we're dying, doing what we love. And then when we landed, we saw Wyatt's plane, and we said, he's like, well, what happened to you guys? And we were like, well, what happened? And he said, we almost hit our plane. So that was how we met. And then a bunch of us afterwards went to a restaurant, and at that point I was ordering a lot of drinks, and we were just distributing them quickly as we could. And that was how I met Wyatt. And so I've kind of tracked Wyatt's career for a few years. I'm really happy that he joined us on this broadcast. And one time, I was watching. I knew he was in Ukraine. We have a lot of friends in Ukraine. In particular, we have Fiorella Isabel, and she's stationed in Russia, and she was reporting for RT at the time. So we do have people there, and also Dan Kovalik had spent a lot of time during going in and out of Ukraine. So Wyatt's down there, and he's returning from, I guess, a restaurant or a bar or something, and he's going back to his hotel. And please tell the story. We can't show the video. If you want to see the video, it's on his Twitter site. But due to some of the language used, we can't use it for WBAI. but Wyatt, please tell us what happened.
Yeah, this was my first trip to Donetsk. I had arrived about 2 hours before this incident. This was at the beginning of, or at the end of 2022, October. So I had just, as I said, just made it to Donetsk. Was trying to find a hotel that had space and had gotten turned down from one, and found this gorgeous hotel in kind of the downtown area um, that is known for being used by international journalists, and checked in. It's about as nice as it can be. The Donbass Palace is the name of the hotel. And obviously in Donetsk, there's very little water access. So you can't really take a shower on demand. You kind of have to wait for water to come once or twice a week, and then fill up whatever buckets you have, and that's your supply of water for the week. So I wasn't able to, take a shower like I'd wanted to. I just said, okay, well, let me go out. I'll try to find something to eat. Then I encountered the next of the problems that one finds living in Donetsk, which is that the curfew means pretty much every restaurant shuts down after 9 o'clock. So it's basically impossible to find anything to eat after that hour if you don't already have it at your house prepared. So instead of going back to the hotel, I thought, well, maybe let me try just a handful of other places around here. I'm going to check this one restaurant on the corner. Thankfully, I did, because I think if I hadn't gone and checked that, I probably would have been hit by that artillery strike, which is what instead happened. As I'm coming back, I'm walking, I'm about 100 meters, and I see this huge blast about 3 stories high hit right in front of my hotel door. And I immediately hit the ground, and just pulled out my phone and started recording. And I didn't really have
What a
much.
journalist.
Well, my
Let me
thought
get
was,
this.
I don't know. I'm not going to go towards it yet. I'm going to wait a second, because I'd heard tell about Ukrainian units, especially kind of the more neo-Nazi aligned, which tend to be stationed there in Donetsk, having preferred or preference for what's called a double tap strike, where they'll just hit the same area a minute or two later once first responders or other people have come to the scene, to create more casualties among the civilian population. So that was my thought was, well, maybe let me wait. I found myself kind of a pretty good little corner where I figured I'm protected from most of the shrapnel as long as it lands over there. And I waited a few seconds, and I said, you know what? All right, let's make it inside. And I just basically just sprinted to the front door, which was smashed, covered in smashed glass. Quickly found the head of security, who wanted to put me down in the basement with the other guests, and I said, no, I'm a journalist. I got to record this. And then I did a couple shots from the scene of the strike. I recorded a dispatch. I went inside and I started talking to the other witnesses and survivors, mainly staff at the hotel, a bunch of whom decided, that's it for the night. We're gonna go home. And with some of the remaining staff and journalists, we kind of just started laughing and breathing this big sigh of relief. No one had been injured. It was fairly minimal property damage. And somebody pulled out a bottle of whiskey, and I said, thank you very much. You knew
It's
exactly
time.
what the doctor ordered. And I sat there with the hotel concierge and another journalist sipping from this bottle of whiskey. I suppose after an artillery strike, you're allowed a little bit of leeway as a hotel employee. So I hope they don't get her in trouble for that. But that was my kind of first experience with United States or Western purchased artillery up close. Not a huge fan, frankly. Probably wouldn't recommend it to other people to be on the receiving end of that. They did recover fragments afterwards of the shell, and I was told it was 155 millimeter shells. That's a NATO standard shell. So obviously, one of our governments very nearly contributed to killing, one of its citizens. Whether or not that would have actually caused any backlash is an entirely separate question. And I think this goes back to Russiagate as well. Just, the ability to convince, the American public that journalists are not really journalists because they believe the wrong things and because they're too willing to listen to what the Russians have to say before judging them.
Well, we're not allowed to use our own eyes and ears as journalists. We're supposed to just recite State Department talking points. And if we use our own observations, then, we're in the crosshairs. And Jeremy, maybe you could talk a little bit about the geography of Ukraine and where Donetsk is and what's so important about Donetsk and why the Ukrainians were bombing basically their own country.
Sure, yeah, and then maybe Wyatt could elaborate on what the people that he interviewed were saying about the conflict. The basic backstory is, the U.S. was intent on using Ukraine as a kind of pawn and battering ram against Russia. The goal was to weaken, because Putin came in 2000. He was supposed to be the successor of Boris Yeltsin, who adopted a very Western pro-U.S. policy, and he was allowing U.S. corporations to loot Russia to gain access to its resources. U.S. investors were starting to take control over oil and gas industry, which is dominant in Russia, and Putin was supposed to continue, and he advanced the neoliberal economic program, privatization. He was acquiescing to NATO expansion. After the end of the Cold War, the U.S. government and especially neoconservatives wanted to dominate the entire Eurasian region and keep the Russians weak. But Putin, didn't go with the program. He started to reclaim more national sovereignty, take back Russian control over its own economy, and went after certain pro-Western oligarchs. And stand up to U.S. In different ways. So he became a target for regime change. And there was a brief reset policy by the Obama administration, but that was thrown aside. These draconian sanctions were imposed on Russia under phony pretext, as we'll be discussing in a subsequent show. And they use Ukraine to attack Russia. And so when the U.S. backed a coup in Ukraine in 2014, that prompted the Eastern Ukraine. They're more oriented to Russia. The people, they're Russian speakers. Their economy and their culture is very much tied to Russia, whereas Western Ukraine are more oriented toward Europe and less friendly toward the Russians. So that fissure in Ukrainian politics was exploited by the United States and EU, who backed this coup, overthrowing a pro-Russian leader, and then the eastern provinces voted for their autonomy, and they were attacked. The Minsk framework could have resolved it peacefully and given them some autonomy that they wanted while staying within Ukraine, but that was not abided by Ukraine. Angela Merkel even admitted that they just signed that to buy time to build up Ukraine military power for an attack on Russia and the people of Eastern Ukraine. And I credit Wyatt because the Grayzone is one of the few outlets that actually was reporting sympathetically about the people of Eastern Ukraine and what they were experiencing, the horrible costs of the war. They were under attack from 2014 on, and I was in Russia and in 2018, and I learned more about the conflict when I was there, and I saw a number of films that were based on firsthand reporting in Eastern Ukraine and what they were experiencing and how the people had to live underground because of these constant missile attacks. and that was funded by the U.S. The arms were provided by the Obama and Trump administration. So, yeah, my question for Wyatt is, what did you experience there beyond that terrible attack you were commenting on, and what were the people telling you about why they were fighting and about the Zelensky or Ukrainian government, for example?
Donetsk and Lugansk were, without a doubt, the most vehemently pro rah 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 Russia, pro Putin, Russian flag in the window everywhere you go. I met nowhere else in that I traveled to in Russia did I experience that kind of like nationalist fervor, where these people not only consider themselves Russians, they will do just about anything to prove it. And they, um, I mean, that translates everywhere you go. You know, it's just the Z's on the back of the car, the St. George ribbons, um, people constantly talking about what's going on. It's because it's not it's not you know, for them it's existential. It's not some theoretical discussion for the dinner table. It's, oh, you know, how did you avoid that explosion today? Did you avoid those bombs, the pedal mines that got dropped in that part of the city? Did you make sure you don't go there tomorrow? So these are the kitchen table issues, right? You have children there who have never known anything but a state of war. Children who are, you know, now some of them approaching adulthood who really, you know, kids that are 11, 12 that have, or, you know, 16, 17 who were too young when the war started to really remember it. So, you know, the only things they remember are being in a permanent state of war, and basically having to live in their basements and shelter all the time. Again, for not because they made an attempt on Zelensky's life, not because they even necessarily joined these militias resisting the Ukrainian side, but just for continuing to live in Donetsk, right? For continuing to live with what the Ukrainian government deems terrorists. I did not find them to be terribly terroristic. I had the opportunity to meet and interview, and bizarrely even ran into a bunch of fairly influential sort of senior officials at a karaoke bar, and found them honestly remarkably tolerant of me from my expectations. A bunch of them spoke very good, you know, very English very well, and they had visited the United States in some cases. Were interested in American culture and American music. Didn't have any real animus for me as an American, despite the fact that it's my country and my government that is funding all of this. So, you know, I was surprised by that. I felt that I would be a little bit less welcome there. You know, even by people who recognize that I wasn't there to tell the same story as the mainstream media, but I wanted to see the other side of it. And you know, I was generally speaking welcomed pretty much everywhere I went. I did see quite a bit of devastation just driving around near the front line. When I went to a city named Rubizhnoye in the north in the Lugansk province, and that was pretty mind-boggling just to see the extent of the destruction. Just miles and miles and miles of bombed out buildings. Uh, you know, whole apartment complexes just leveled to the ground. And they hadn't had time at that point to do reconstruction yet. It's kind of fairly remote sort of region. And then,
excuse me, the part that I just want to get across to our audience is that if we were to compare the United States to Ukraine, it's a situation of like almost a civil war where you have,
right.
let's say, the North bombing the hell out of the South. And this is before the Russians got involved. How long, Jeremy? It's since 2014.
That's
The
right.
I guess the East is bombing the West, or how would you explain this
Well, in
geographically?
many ways, this was a genuine humanitarian intervention. Yeah, and the left, it was completely lost on this issue for reasons we were discussing before, including I think people like gatekeepers like in Isakov played a key role in distorting the nature of the conflict and invoking this kind of Cold War demonology of the Russians of the bad guys. But yeah, what was left out is that the people of eastern Ukraine were under attack after the coup of 2014 because they didn't support the new government. Yanukovych, the deposed leader, had a strong base in eastern Ukraine, and his people were forced to flee, and they were terrorized. And there were the Odessa, because in western Ukraine they have the nationalist extremists who are Banderite. They worship Stepan Bandera, who was a Nazi collaborator, and there are a lot of extremists, and they were unleashed by this coup, and they were part of the coalition that overthrew Yanukovych, and it was a classic coup. When the protest started, they didn't have enough signature. There was an election coming up the next year. They didn't they could have focused on trying to have Yanukovych defeated in the election. They didn't get enough signatures to impeach him. So they used violent methods, and then they framed him for attacks on the protesters that were actually false flag operations. And this has been exposed by Dr. Ivan Kachanovsky, who researched this in great depth and published a book on this. So yeah, these people were then unleashed on the people of eastern Ukraine, who were pushing for greater autonomy and not just acquiescing to the new coup government, although they did, and they were trying to also push the Ukrainian language on them. They passed these language laws so that they couldn't even have schools in Russian language, which was their native language. And then they were attacked. They had the neo-Nazi thugs unleashed on them, committing horrendous atrocities. The U.S. Obama administration is supplying all kinds of weaponry and drones. They claim they were supplying only non-lethal aid in the Obama years, but it included things like drones, and they were terrorizing the people for years. They had to live in underground, as Wyatt was pointing out. They had to live in shelters. The kids couldn't go to school. Civilian infrastructure was being attacked. People were being killed. It was a horrible way to live. And they were begging on the Russians to intervene to save them. They needed the might of the Russian army to stand up to Ukraine, which was financed by the United States. So if you look at it, it can be considered a humanitarian intervention by the Russian to protect these people. And the Western media never gave voice. And that's why I can't forgive the alternative media. And I think Grayzone is the exception, but the networks that we've discussed on this show that are
Which we
deeply
can't name.
flawed or infiltrated, they never, they're supposed to be for human rights, but they never addressed the plight of the Eastern Ukrainian people who were terrorized for years. And imagine kids, as Wyatt described, have to grow up in this horrible environment. And I did a story on this ballerina. I was brought to tears because I have a daughter who does figure skating, and this was a story about a ballerina, at the same age as my daughter, was murdered. It was doing her ballet and came from her practice, and a missile struck and killed her and her coach and her grandmother. Just these things have been going on, and they're never spotlighted. Certainly not on CNN or Fox, but not also on a network we know. And on the counter, a lot of the left websites just dropped the ball on this. So
What I'm
people didn't understand that they needed the Russian to protect them.
But what
But
I'm trying to
Russia,
establish, okay, it's like if California started bombing the hell out of New York, right? If the West was bombing the East.
Well, it is a civil war. And there's also a level of resentment that comes alongside. Why are you sticking your nose in a war between brothers, which is kind of how it's seen and understood, at least from the Russian perspective. And frankly, the reason that this war has gone on so long and it's not being prosecuted the same way that Israel is currently carrying out this genocidal starvation siege of Gaza, which, Russia certainly could have done to Kiev if it had the desire to do so. They could have done that kind of tactic to the rest of Ukraine, and not just to Mariupol, this city in the east where, as Jayme pointed out, the Nazi elements like Azov basically set up shop as kind of a forward operating base in enemy territory. Here's where we neutralize this, and we teach those Russians in the east to start speaking Ukrainian. That obviously backfired, and now people there are vehemently consider themselves Russia. There is very little chance of many of these people ever considering themselves Ukrainian again, even if they are ethnically Ukrainian, at least in the East, I would say. But, in my experience, definitely confirmed a lot of what Jayme said about post-2014, people being forced to Ukrainify themselves in terms of the Russian language, being isolated, and its speakers being kind of alienated. In terms of the curriculum, I spoke with a principal at a school in Lugansk, and she said that now after 2014, we were forced to teach children that it was not, our grandfathers in the Red Army who fought with the Soviet Union who were the good guys in World War II. It was Stepan Bandera, and these, Nazi-aligned factions that actually openly allied with the Nazis for many years and served as their shock troops to carry out some of the worst atrocities of the Holocaust. These were actually the real heroes. And for people whose families sacrificed everything, and in Russia, they lost something like 30% of the population. I think every family in Russia lost someone in their family during World War II, what they call the Great Patriotic War. And so that kind of sacrifice to be spat on, to be forced to hide, just to be able to go about your life, that really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and I think for good reason.
Well, I think we're coming down to the last part. I see a note. I think it's important for Wyatt at this time to really tell us where we can follow your work and kind of what you're working on now.
Yeah, we
you.
have a few investigations in the works. I don't want to telegraph any punches too much until we get them out. Usually, I like to keep things kind of close to the chest, but we have quite a bit coming in terms of some of the so-called international justice system, in terms of how that's been weaponized towards Syria. That's something we've got working on, and Ukraine as well. Let me think. We have an investigation coming into the level of weapons shipments that have continued to be sent from Canada, even as they, accuse Israel of committing war crimes, and as they prepare to recognize a Palestinian state. There's a new report that found nearly 400 shipments of military hardware, including weapons. Hundreds of thousands of bullets have been shipped from Canada, despite these promises. That'll be coming, I think, today. And just keep your eyes on the Grayzone. There's always something new coming, and we got quite a bit in the pipeline, even if I can't tell you all quite about it just yet.
And of course, we have the article that you had just published. I think Jayme's going to put it up. It's FBI Surveil 2018 Russia and WikiLeaks panel featuring the Grayzone files show. It's by Wyatt Reed, and it's dated July 24th. So it's still very fresh. And we have an article by Jayme. Jayme, do you have the title of your article, or can you put it up there? Okay. Newly declassified documents underscore how claims of Russian election interference in 2016 were overhyped, much like non-existent Iraqi weapons of mass destruction. Okay, well, we are going to close out.
This is the Iraq War. We've seen the cycle continue to repeat itself, and this is the WMD of the 2010, the Russian election interference lie, and it's still being peddled. They refuse to acknowledge. There's not one iota of evidence of Russia election interference, and these new documents just underscore that even further. Although it's not necessarily surprising, we already really knew what was released in these Gabbard documents, but it's just a little more information. But the media still refuses, the mainstream refuses to acknowledge that reality, and is still pushing ahead with this anti-Russian propaganda. And I think, this show has been valuable, and why it's valuable in showing that the ramifications of that, the terrorization of the people of eastern Ukraine, the huge loss of life, and the marshaling of our own resources into warfare when our own society crumbled, our own infrastructure, our own education system. That's where our government should be funding to create a better society. Instead, we ruin these other countries. And it's these false narratives. That's why it's so important to identify these lies, because it's these lies that undergird that distorted policy.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, I'm not sure if Wyatt said it, but the Ukrainians are not supposed to be bombing within their country their own civilian buildings. I mean, this was a hotel, and I believe this hotel was used, Wyatt, correct me if I'm wrong, but by a lot of journalists as well, and foreign people. So this was also a very frightening attack.
Well, and I don't know if we have time for me to, I think it was kind of politically motivated too, because according to local sources, that hotel, the Donbass Palace, when Donetsk was taken over briefly by the Nazis in the 1940s, that was used as their general headquarters. So there is a long-standing kind of animosity and hatred of the idea that these, subhumans, these Untermenschen Russians, are over there using our wonderful Aryan hotel. I think that level, I later discovered that, and I said, okay, there's a political dimension to this too, where they just, there's some kind of Nazi pride at stake here.
Wow. Well, I just have to wrap up the show. Before I do that, we need to always say a second disclaimer because of our content. The opinions you hear are ours, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. That wraps up our show for today. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined here by Professor Jayme Kuzmarov. Remember to like and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. Okay, just Wyatt, we're still live, but we're no longer recording for the radio. So this is an opportunity to go over anything that you didn't have a chance to say, that you wanted to get a chance to say. But don't take your clothes off, because we're still live. Sometimes our guests forget and they start
because sometimes if I need to edit, I can use some of this material to
backfill
in the radio. Yeah.
Well, I guess the angle I found interesting is that these new disclosures by Tulsi Gabbard, they still are kind of trying to portray this that Russia was somehow responsible for hacking the DNC. They're still going with it, and they admit that their only evidence for this is some kind of human source who's heard secondhand that this is that this is what Putin thinks, this is going on, that the Russians are behind this hacking. So some guy in Russia told them, and then literally one guy, and that is basically the only evidence they have for this. But they're still publicly maintaining that this is the case, that there is some evidence that Russia was behind all this, according to one guy.
That's all they
And yeah,
need.
the Gabbard leaks, don't really deal with that too much. Like the documents they have, a lot of it is with cyber. They don't specifically deal with that.
Well,
What
there
the
was
the
the
BIPS
2020
are supposed.
assessment, right?
Yeah,
That leaked was specifically it said that there was one source of this notion,
yeah, one unnamed source. I
one
mean, you
unnamed
can't, as a
source.
journalist, you can't base an article on an unnamed source who gets something secondhand, or in a court of law. That's not
Hearsay.
really credible evidence to prove, even to speculate, because anybody, I mean, they could be making that up, or anybody has any agenda. So if you don't have any concrete evidence, you can't really go forward with that kind of allegation.
Yeah.
Unless
Another
it's Russia.
another
Yeah,
angle
exactly.
of this story that was kind of oddly funny. I mean, it's terrible in the sense that you have like Roger Stone, who is kind of an operative, and I think Randy didn't think he was a very high level operative, and he was kind of using this to try to get in better with the Trump administration because there was a falling out. But they're publicizing on CNN and videos and all kinds of interviews their texts between Roger Stone and Randy Credico. I mean, he is so exposed, and some of these texts, I have to say, are kind of funny, and they're also chilling because these are two guys. We're not talking anything really highfalutin here. They wanted to make an example out of Roger Stone, and they were going to use Randy Credico to do it. And, so here you have these two guys. And this was a quote by Roger Stone. He says, "Our texts are the late night bickering of two grumpy political veterans who have known each other for years. They are friendly as well as nasty, rabid, vicious, inconsistently humorous, and vile." And one of the things that Stone was threatening Randy about, and Randy has this really fluffy, I don't know if I could say this right, cotton de Tulare, if it's a white fluffy dog and named Bianca. And Stone wrote, "I'm going to take that dog away from you. Not an effing thing you can do about it." I mean, he's threatening Randy's dog. I mean, that's how this whole Russia nightmare is whipped up, so that like just regular people are now attacking each other because they've got investigations from Congress and the FBI, and it really puts the flame on it. And Credico replied, "You don't have a constitutional right to threaten me, and especially not threaten my dog. You crossed a red line." And then Stone wrote back, "Rotten hell." I mean, this is I mean, this stuff is funny, but it's this panic that, and actually, Jeremy talks a lot about this tension, the strategy of tension that this surveillance creates. And this is some
Well,
of the
it's true. It puts
fallout.
a lot of pressure on people. That was a hallmark of the McCarthy era. It forces them sometimes to rat out their associate to save their own career or neck, or they have to make anguished choices. And those who refuse to acquiesce, pay severe price as far as their career, their livelihood, their family. It leads to depression or suicide in some cases. And it's similar with whistleblower. They're attacked in that way. That may be in the intention, create this toxic political environment, and that's what kind of fueled the war machine, because it turns people on each other, and it allows for scapegoating Russia for all the problems in the country. So I think you're right. It's really a ruling class technique, and it shows how sinister they are.
I think too, the thing that strikes me is how all of this really laid the groundwork for the Ukraine war. It brought up all the old Russophobia that existed from the Cold War era, brought it back. I mean, if you remember back in 2012 when Obama and Mitt Romney were in the debates, and Obama said, what did he say? You know,
1980 called it once its foreign policy
right.
package.
Yeah, right. He said, like, we're not enemies with Russia anymore. But then all of that flipped in like 4 years, and because Hillary lost. But I think they would have tried to bring up the anti-Russian sentiment anyway, because they've been wanting to do this Ukraine war. I think the Ukraine war was on pause for 4 years because Trump got elected. Now I know he did a lot to help Ukraine prepare for the war, but I think if Hillary had been in there, it would have happened much sooner. And but this Russophobia was used to just get the public on board for this Ukraine thing, which has been a massive disaster, and the people who in charge still don't even want to acknowledge it, really. And like, they just need to end it. The longer it goes, the worse it's going to get for our side. And it just comes down to this blind bigotry and hatred that just came out of nowhere. And the people who are calling it out are somehow the bad guys. Like, hey, we think this Russophobia thing is bad, the Russiagate thing is bad, but we're the ones who are at fault here. We're the ones causing the trouble, trying to expose this whole scam. It's so insidious. And
Jayme,
it tells us we're run by the bad guys.
Jayme, could you put up the thing from Green Renaissance that has the photo of
just the photo?
Yeah, just the photo of the dog. And the other thing that
I'm gonna have to run in a minute because I got another.
I've got something for you, Jayme. I just wanted you to, if you could recite from your article the what came out about Hillary Clinton, which had me laughing about her mental health.
Said that she suffered from all kind of health problems, thrombosis and a heart condition, and then it pointed to her anger management that they had to put her on tranquilizers. Apparently, Putin knew all that and didn't release it. I mean, the documents make it seem that the American the assessment was that Putin thought that they were both. He wasn't necessarily favoring Trump in the election. He didn't really like or trust either of the two candidates, and he thought the U.S.-Russian relations wouldn't improve. The anti-Russia sentiment would continue, whoever was elected. But he refused to release any of that information that he had been given by Russian intelligence about Clinton. And the anger management stuff I know about, having studied it, wrote a book on Clinton and studied their time as when Bill was the Arkansas governor. A lot of staff commented that Hillary was a monster, that she would go on tirade, that she had a horrible temper, and was a horrible person, was completely different on the camera than off the camera, that she was a total phony and like a tyrant, who terrorized the staff. She was that kind of person. I've heard that about Nancy Reagan.
And that's the tranquilized version too.
Yeah.
Imagine
that was
without
years
the tranquilizers.
earlier. I'm sure she got worse and worse as she got older. But apparently Nancy Reagan was like that. The Reagan's daughter wrote a scathing book about it, because the Reagan's daughter was like a hippie and hated the politics of her father, and she wrote a scathing book that I read, and it was scathing about her mother. Her mother, Nancy, also abused the staff and stuff in the house, and these two, these kind of evil type people.
Well, still, it's funny that it came out about Clinton. Could you put up the shot again?
And Bill had an explosive temper too. He used to berate his staff, and they were terrorized by him. And he had a real dark side. He's a rapist and a violent sociopath. So I mean, we seem to get these kind of people. I think Trump is also a sociopath. So.
I just wanted to end with a shot of Randy's dog and explain that. He took it down kind of fast. Okay, this is Randy's dog. It's this fluffy white dog, and it got this madness drilled down to a point where
Yeah,
someone's
well,
dog
Randy
was
loves his
threatened.
dog. I don't know him well, but I heard from somebody who's very close to him that he loves his dog. It's so this was really below the belt by
Look how
Roger
cute that little
Stone.
dog is. It's so fluffy and white, and it got down. It got down that low. It got down that low, folks.
But that was I mean, Roger Stone is a shady character, but the way they prosecuted him, they had the FBI raid his home, and it was really over the top, and his trial was a farce. And this whole thing was a farce. The subtitle of my book was "The First Cold War is Tragedy, the Second is Farce," because it was, we see that they're going forward with claim completely devoid of facts, uh, and these ridiculous allegations. And unfortunately, people believe it. It ingrains this dark narrative of Russia and these supposed treasonous collaborators with Russia, but there's not iota of evidence. I mean, the first Cold War, there were some spies. That was grossly overblown as well, but there were a few Russian agents and defectors. But in this Cold War, it's just totally about nothing because there are no Russian agents among Americans on the left or people like Roger Stone. It's absolutely ridiculous.
And I remember when it first came up, when I was still on Facebook, and it started coming out. Oh, the Russians interfered in this election after Trump won in 2016, and I was like, well, of course they did. I mean, they always do. We interfere with theirs. They interfere with ours. It's tit for tat. But they're not the worst ones. There's other people
Yeah,
that do it too.
but they
But
didn't
then it just blew
interfere
up.
in this
Everybody was
election.
like, "Oh, it's the
But
Russians."
that's the wrong assertion that they interfered. There's no evidence that has ever come to light that they interfered in any way.
Well,
Apart from regular intelligence information, they may have been reporting on certain things or trying to amass intelligence information, but there's no evidence from any of the documents, including, as Wyatt pointed out, it's even when they're making an allegation, it's from some secondhand source. Somebody said this, third-hand source speculating. There's no hard evidence of any Russian election interference, and most people just think of that it exists. Maybe it's overblown, but it exists. But there's no evidence at all. It's a false.
Matter
I'm
of fact,
referring.
with the Clinton, tranquilizer story, the Russians knew that and held it back
Yeah,
so that they
that's.
wouldn't
I didn't know
interfere.
about that.
Well, that's
Well,
Yeah.
they had a smoking gun on
Well,
their nuts,
so correct me if I'm
I
boiling
wrong,
remember.
but
nuts.
I
They
thought
held
the
back.
I thought the at least the 2020 intelligence community document, or the recent one that was released, I'm almost positive that there's a passage in there where they say that the intelligence community has determined that the Russians view the Republican Party as more Russophobic and more likely to push anti-Russian policies. I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was in one of these recently released documents.
Yeah.
Well, they managed to
I
get the
don't know for
Democratic
sure,
I
Party.
but
haven't
yeah,
seen
it's
that.
probably in there. And yeah, I know they don't trust Trump at all, and for good reason. Because I mean, look at his policy in both terms. Like, I mean, he pulled out of the INF treaty in his first term. He ratcheted up. His administration provided the anti-javelin tank missile because Obama was providing only non-lethal aid. Trump upped the ante and started providing anti-javelin tank missiles, and now he's expanding aid to Zelensky. He talks BS. He makes like he's going to end the conflict, but he continues to pump in money and expand the money and expand the sanctions. He signed off on huge sanctions, expanding on what Obama had done. So the Russians get nothing out of him, and they don't trust him. I don't think they ever did. And by now they don't care for him at all, just like the Clintons. So
Yeah, absolutely.
anyway, we better wrap it up because
Yeah.
Wyatt probably has stuff to do. So thank you so much,
Yeah.
Wyatt, for
Thank you,
joining
Wyatt.
us.
I hope you
you,
come
Wyatt.
back.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Great interview, and hopefully we can collaborate together in the future.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Jeremy had
And
an ask. There's a thing coming up.
okay,
It's
sure. Yeah.
Jeremy, what is it?
Oh, well, that's up. Yeah, I saw you guys are running a festival or something. That looks good.
Oh, we have a yeah.
Independent
You got
journalism.
a ticket for
It's not.
Jeremy?
It's not us. I'm sure we can get. I'm sure I can get a ticket somehow. It's the Icarus Festival people. I
Oh,
know they're
okay.
gonna. I know they want me to come up to New Jersey and uh, I can see if there's if I can get a ticket or two for free. I'll be happy to throw one your way.
Okay, let us
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
I'm in Florida, so I'm good. But Jeremy,
Well, it may be hard for
Jeremy's.
me to get there because
Oh
I
yeah,
live in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
oh,
So,
that's true.
Hey,
but
I'm up for a road
yeah, in the
trip.
future
Wyatt.
we can do stuff together. Yeah. Or
Yeah, and if you ever have anything you want to submit to potentially get published with the Grayzone, I'd be thrilled to take a look. So just reach out anytime.
Okay, sounds good. I think I'll get your email from Gloria.
Okay,
And
yeah,
Jeremy,
that's great.
do you have any more appearances coming up this week?
Oh yeah, Jeremy. when you go on what is
Are you
it?
going to be on
Well, I
Garland
usually
or
go on the
Garland
Garland
show?
Nixon show. I'm not going this week because I'm in Washington and he has something. I usually go every Friday on his show, but I'm not going this week. But next week.
All right.
Plug Uncontrolled Opposition. You're driving Jayme nuts.
Oh well, I
he
don't really have the
loves watching
opportunity.
Garland, and he sees you on there, and he's like, Jeremy, say something about Uncontrolled Opposition,
Oh,
and you're
okay.
like,
I'll try and mix it in. I don't usually have an opportunity to discuss
He won't mind. Just
projects I'm
interject
involved with, but yeah.
when he's talking about covert action and saying I'm also doing the podcast too.
Okay, yeah, I'll try and interject if I can.
You have to be like,
All right.
This is
Well,
what
anyway,
I made on my weekly
whoa,
podcast.
your microphone. Why your microphone just got nuts?
I don't know what's going on with that. You guys
he turned into a robot.
on my end.
AI
I'll call
Wyatt.
it, but
Well, we were
Thanks.
just about to wrap up anyway. So
Okay. Take care, guys.
thank you, Wyatt. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank
Thanks,
you, Gloria.
Wyatt. Yeah.
Thank
Everybody
you.
at home, remember to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. It's more
Make
important now than
noise,
ever.
people.
Leave a comment because like YouTube is now looking for active engagement, not just passive engagement. But do all the things. You've been on YouTube for a while. We're all veterans here. So thank you for watching Uncontrolled Opposition. We'll be back next week. Have a great weekend, everybody.